Nothing less than a new world order. This is the pledge of the world's most powerful leaders, representing 90% of the global economy. Thursday's G20 summit, they say, has changed the rules of the game.
Today, the largest countries of the world have agreed a global plan for recovery and reform. This involves the biggest interest rate cuts in history, the biggest fiscal stimulus we have ever seen, the biggest increase in resources in the history of our international institutions.
A total of $5 trillion for the global economy by the end of next year, including $1 trillion for the International Monetary Fund. Staggering figures that the 20 countries, along with international institutions, agreed upon to combat the crisis. The G20 has laid out other measures, too, to firm up a financial system many say enabled the worst excesses of the past. These include an end to tax havens, stronger regulation of companies and banks, and new rules to rein in corporate bonuses.
Hi, this is Pastor Joe Green, head pastor of Antioch Assembly Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you today. Today I'm going to be talking about global economics and the mark of the beast. Global economics and the mark of the beast. If you've been following the 2019 movement, I've been talking a lot about what's known in the Bible as Mystery Babylon, the mother of all harlots and the abominations of the earth. It's the end time system that rules the world. And so I want to share a couple of things with you just to just kind of decode some things. So I'm working on this this book called Mystery Babylon Decoded. And so these are some of the things that we're getting from the Mystery Babylon Decoded research that I do. I'm a researcher. I do a lot of research and try to back everything that I have with not only foundational biblical principles, but also with actual documentation, books, and things of that sort, in order for us to have a good understanding as to what is occurring in the world. So, you know, in the Mystery Babylon system, it talks about in the book of Revelation, Revelation 13, 16 to 18 says, he causes all, this is talking about the Antichrist, he causes all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on the right hand or their forehead, and that no man, no person can buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Now, if you've been following the 2019 movement, or if you've been subscribed to my YouTube channel, I do some teaching on who that is. You know, there's a video I did called The Synagogue of Satan. And so if you look at that, I talk about who I believe this represents, right? The number is 666 and the mark of the beast. And there's different theories. I do believe it's part of the Rothschild banking system. So if you look at the Rothschild symbol, which is a hexagram, if you add it up numerically in the occult, it adds up to 666, 3 triangles. So anyway, that's a whole nother talk. But at the end of the day, what we recognize, or what we understand by these verses, is that there's going to be a system in place called the system of the beast, as the Bible calls it. And that there's going to be a system set up that no one can buy or sell anything unless they subscribe to that system. That system is also known as Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of all harlots and the abominations of the earth. So you have a economic system, a religious system, and a governmental system that are all interconnected, and it opposes the kingdom of God system. So that's Mystery Babylon in a nutshell. So when you look at the system that's in place, it's also known as the New World Order, because it's a one world governmental system. So if you hear me talk about the New World Order, basically I'm talking about this Mystery Babylon system that the Bible talks about. Now, one of the things that we see here, and like I said, whether or not you are, you know, when I talk about politics, I don't talk about politics from a partisan standpoint. So whether it's Republican, Democrat, or anything like that, because if you, as I say all the time, I'm independent. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I was, as most black people are or were, I was a Democrat for many years. So from 1985 until 2012, I was actually a registered Democrat. So I've never been a Republican, and now I'm independent because although politics is an important part of this world system in our everyday lives, I don't believe, especially as a Christian, especially as a black man and a Christian, that we should subscribe to one of the political parties, right? So Republicans or Democrats, because they both have their failings. And when we become so loyal to the party, we actually end up falling into the trap of the New World Order. Because if you look at this last cycle, a lot of people showed their real true colors in this last 2016 election cycle. So you have what's called the shadow government or the deep state. And the deep state or the shadow government is the government behind the government that's actually pushing for a one world government. So, and I said all that to say that whether you are a Trump fan or not, again, I'm not a big fan of how he insults people, his language, his crudeness, how he carries himself. I'm not a big fan of any of those things, right? Some of his stuff that he had in his past is not something that's very honorable, right? So I don't think he thinks sometimes, and maybe he does, maybe it's all part of his whole strategy. But at the end of the day, what I will say are the things that he's standing for, the things that he's pushing. The reason you're seeing such pushback is because his strategy, or what he stands for, his principles are actually anti-New World Order principles. So like Make America Great Again, or the sovereignty of a country, that goes against the strategy of the New World Order people. So that's why you see such a frantic attack on President Trump like I've never seen before. There were people that disagree with Obama and his agenda. I disagree with a lot of his principles, but not like this. Not like this. You have Republicans, Democrats, you have all of them. You have all the mainstream media. So basically in this last election cycle, he was against the Republicans, the Democrats, the mainstream media, Hollywood, and professional sports. All of them kind of joined forces against him because all of those are tools to the New World Order. I'm going to say that again. Whether it's our current Republican Democrat system, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's professional sports, at the top, all of these are tools of the New World Order. Some people call them the Illuminati. That's why they're all in frantic fight mode against President Trump. They don't reflect the country because if you look at the last voting cycle, it was almost 50-50. Now, I know people say, well, Hillary had, 2 or 3 million more popular votes. Yeah, if you talk about 2 or 3 million out of, 60 million or so or more that voted, so that's still, that's not a majority. It's evenly split. Trump, Hillary, Republican, Democrat. So if that's the case, how is it that mainstream media, Hollywood, everybody is frantically against Trump, right? Like, all of you guys are stupid. Everybody in the world is stupid, and they know stuff and nobody else knows anything. It's because they're all part of the tools of the New World Order, which is why they are fighting so frantically against Trump. When they say that his policies are harmful, they're harmful to the New World Order agenda. They're not harmful to the country. And I'm going to spell out a couple of those things, and I'm going to walk it down for you. The reason that I supported President Trump was not because of his personality, even though I think he's a very colorful individual, but because for years I had been studying the New World Order agenda, and when I began to hear his rhetoric actually was speaking against the very strategies that were meant to oppress us as a people, but more specifically, black people have gotten the brunt of this agenda. So even though the New World Order agenda affects everybody, the rest of the 99%, but you have to recognize that black people are getting hit the hardest. So when you talk about illegal immigration, it affects black males more than any other group of people in America. Illegal immigration. When you look at the shipping jobs overseas, right, which is part of the New World Order agenda to have a global economy, it affects black males the worst. When you think about some of these things like the population control, eugenics, which is abortion, affects black males the most. The prison industrial complex, which is part of the New World Order agenda, it affects black males more than anybody else. Abortion, when you think about, part of the Jaffe memo of depopulation, if you get a chance to look at the Jaffe memo, they said they're going to put chemicals in the water supply to make people sterile and infertile. You look at things like Flint, Michigan, and all these other places, they affect people of color, but more specifically black people more than anything. So if anybody should be concerned with this agenda, it should be black people. The gun control, they're trying to attack the Second Amendment. And that's strategic, because in order for you to oppress a people or bring in a totalitarian regime, the first thing you would do is, well, the second thing you do is get rid of their guns. The first thing you do is get rid of religion. So if you look at the platform, the agendas of the New World Order, we black people are affected the worst out of everybody. It's everybody gets affected, but we are affected more than anybody. And again, I don't tell you stuff that's based on my opinion. That statistically, you can see these things. You can look at the strategy and how it's targeting people of color, which is why they had housing discrimination. Like in Chicago, they didn't have housing discrimination necessarily because they just cared about where black people live, but they wanted to keep them in a concentrated area so that when they push an agenda, they can reach a greater amount of people. So anyway, let me move forward. So the New World Order is in panic mode because of some of the strategies that President Trump said, like securing our borders is anti-New World Order. Putting America first is anti-New World Order. Going against NAFTA and TPP is anti-New World Order. And let me break that down for you. So you remember the Clintons, I believe it was the Clintons put it in place. The NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was supposed to be an agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, right? North American Free Trade Agreement. It was supposed to give preferential trade to Mexico and Canada. Now, on the surface, it seems like it was a positive thing, but what you have to look at the underlying results of the free trade. It wasn't supposed to bring Mexico up to the level of the United States. It was actually meant to take the United States down to Mexico's level, right? Because economically, Mexico was a relatively poor country and still is compared to the United States. But in order for you to push a New World Order agenda, you can't have a wealthy, strong United States, because a wealthy, strong United States hinders the advancement of the New World Order agenda. So what happens is you had companies that began to ship jobs into Mexico, like the car companies, because of things like NAFTA, these trade agreements that made it was okay for companies to outsource their jobs to other countries, and they got cheaper labor because the economy in Mexico was worse than the economy in the United States. So they got cheaper labor. So think about it as a company, if I had a job like the automobile industry, I knew people that lived in Detroit, in Michigan, and they would make, some of them make $20, $25 an hour. This was years ago, right? So that was a good salary, especially for, back in the 80s and 90s and whatever. So if you took that same job, and it might not have been $20 or $25 an hour, I'm kind of rounding it out just so you can get a picture of what I'm talking about. So if you take that same exact job and take it to Mexico and charge, and you could pay somebody $5 an hour, right, without the great benefits that you would have to give them in the United States, it's very cost effective for a company to outsource their jobs. A lot of the tech companies or customer service jobs, and I know all of you have dealt with this, they outsource their jobs to India. I've been to India a couple of times. The cost of living in India is very, very, very inexpensive. So, for instance, my good friend who's from India, he told me in India, if you paid a high-level engineer $30,000 a year, you can have the top engineers around, lining up around the block to get a job. Now here in America, if you are a top-notch engineer and a tech person, you would make more than $30,000 a year is what I'm saying. So they would outsource a lot of these jobs to these other countries because of these trade agreements. So you had NAFTA, which is North American Free Trade Agreement. You have the TPP, which is a similar one. It's the transatlantic, I think. So anyway, it was an international trade agreement, and again, this was implemented under the Obama administration, and it is an anti-American, basically it's an anti-American agenda. It's a pro-globalist, pro-New World Order trade agreements. So all these trade agreements were not meant to, you know, and taking away tariffs. So what is a tariff? In case you don't know, many of you probably are familiar. A tariff means if a foreign company wants to sell their goods here in the United States, there's a special tax that's taxed to them. Because if you think about it, if they make their products overseas and they sell it here in America, that money is leaving this country and going to another country. So what they would do is they would put a tax, a special tax on these companies. So even though they could sell their goods here, we benefited from it as a country. And it kept the playing field fair because, and let me give you an example. Let's say an iPhone, you know, China made iPhones. Well, Apple is an American company, but let's say Samsung, because that's a foreign company. So if Samsung was making their product in Asia and they could charge a third less for labor and parts, they could sell their products in the United States at half the price that American company would be able to sell here because they have to pay more for labor. So if that's the case, think about this for a second. It doesn't benefit, you know, the most consumers. If you could buy a smartphone and it was similar in how it, you know, and how it performed, but one is half the price of the other one, obviously you would buy the one that was half the price of the other one for the same quality, right? So what tariffs do is try to offset that, which makes it so that these companies don't have the price advantage to sell stuff in the United States, right? It evens the playing field and it gives us benefit back to this country. Now I'm going somewhere with this, so I want you to follow me, if you will. So when these things happen, you have to realize that people that put these trade agreements in place they're not looking out for the best interests of America. They are looking out for the best interests of the globalist economy, which is the New World Order. And if you haven't been following the 2019 movement, the people in the New World Order, One World Government, Illuminati, if you will, they recognize and acknowledge that Lucifer is the head of the New World Order, right? Lucifer is the head of the New World Order. We know him to be Satan or the devil, the adversary. So when you put all these things in perspective, then you have to understand that these things are not just not in the best interest of America or the citizens of America, and especially minorities, but it's anti-God, anti-Christian, right? So all these things come into play. So we should pay attention. It should matter to us, and we have to look at things from its proper perspective. Because what mainstream media did was tell us that when he got off the NAFTA and the TPP, that it was going to be damaging for America. When he started to say publicly that China was cheating us on trade, they weren't being fair to us, and it came out in the press that that was an accurate statement. China has even apologized because they were dealing with us unfairly, right? So we have a president who's supposed to look out for the best interests of our country. But mainstream media has us so twisted around that they make us seem like we are crazy because we have a president that says, let's put America first, right? Or people that say, when he says, make America great again, they say, well, what are you referring to, Mr. President? Now, just for the record, Bill Clinton said the same thing. Bill Clinton in '92 was running on the same platform of make America great again. So black people need to get out of their feelings and realize that you supported Bill Clinton for saying the same thing. Now, I mean, Bill Clinton didn't come from a different reality to President Trump. So if we think make America great again was racist when Trump says it, has to be racist when Bill Clinton said it as well, right? But here's what I take from Make America Great Again. In the 70s, the late 70s, the early 80s, and the 90s, America had one of the strongest economies. Well, let's say even before that. The 70s was a kind of a anomaly, right? So from the 50s and the 60s, America had the strongest economy, one of the strongest economies in the world, right? We made goods and services here. We had some of the best products in the world, right? In those times, in the 80s, in the late 70s and the 80s, you had a lot of, you know, my grandparents, my pop-up and my grandpop, they worked in the steel mill here locally in central Pennsylvania. They made a very good living working in the steel mill. When I went to college at University of Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh was a steel town, right? Which is why you have the Pittsburgh Steelers. So when I went to college in the 80s, the mid-80s, I would drive past a whole lot of empty steel mills. That the steel mills were basically closed down and they shipped the jobs overseas and they started producing steel in Japan. Here in central Pennsylvania, there used to be Harrisburg Steel. that's closed down. They tore the plant down. You know, Bethlehem Steel. There's a steel mill. It's now a different name in Stilton, but it's not nearly as large of an employer as it used to be, because those jobs have been shipped overseas. So when you think about these trade agreements, when you think about we have presidents and leaders who have been okay with allowing these companies to ship jobs overseas, that hurts our economy. But more importantly, it's usually the unskilled labor or the lower skilled laborers who get affected the most. So minorities and poor people, those are the jobs that they're losing out on. You know, the manufacturing jobs are being shipped overseas. These companies, because it's in their best interest, you know, financially for them to do it. So now we have a president that comes against these trade agreements and begins to make other countries hold them accountable for, you know, for how they do business here. So when we talk about Make America Great Again, there was a time, I've been to Detroit. I was in Detroit about 4 or 5 years ago. Detroit was, at one point, I think it was the 50s or the 60s, I believe it was, or somehow, some in the near past, I should say. Detroit had one of the highest economies in the country because the auto industry was booming. There was a lot of jobs, especially for minorities, because Detroit is the majority of people in Detroit are people of color. So I've been to Detroit 4 or 5 years ago. It's like a ghost town in some parts because they shipped all the jobs overseas because of these unfair trade agreements, and because of it, the economy hurts. But more importantly, more specifically, it hurt mainly black males the most. So now you have high crime rate in Detroit, high murder rates. You have disenfranchisement there like nothing you ever seen. You know, and that only breeds violence and corruption and all that other stuff when you have those things. So we have to understand the nature of what's going on here. There was a thing in the last election cycle also called Brexit. Brexit was in the UK when they voted to come away from the European Union. That's a good thing. The reason it's a good thing is because the European Union is one of the tools that was meant to push towards a new world order. I'm going to say that again. The European Union, the EU, is a conglomeration of European nations that all come together under the umbrella because with the New World Order people, they wanted to section the world off in zones, in 10 zones. And one of the zones was the European Union. The other one is the North American Union. So those are the zones that were making way for the New World Order. So the people of the UK, Great Britain, they recognized that. So they voted to remove Great Britain from the European Union. They called it Brexit. Now that's a good thing for us, for the average everyday ordinary people. And it was that similar sentiment that pushed the 2016 election cycle. Now I know mainstream media has lied to you and they made you think it was all because of racism and everything. And that's not the case. That's a lie. They say that in order to paint a negative picture for people like President Trump. Because I know for a fact, I know people personally, like I said, I experienced the whole Pittsburgh thing where they outsource jobs. So when he keeps talking about bringing jobs back to America, making America great again, the families in Pittsburgh that traditionally were steel mill jobs and in central Pennsylvania, a lot of them that resonated because they saw the empty steel mills. They knew that their jobs were being outsourced to other countries. Most of you know that you pick up the phone and call customer service and someone picked it up halfway across the world who could barely speak English, and it annoyed us because they outsourced those jobs, right? So when he says bring jobs back and make America great again, that resonated with those people. When he talked about securing the borders, right? I know people personally who lived in Arizona and different places like that. I knew a guy I had met and was in a conference with him. He was a Border Patrol person in Arizona. He said his whole area was terrified by the illegal immigrants and gangs that came over in America because of the weak borders. And he was targeted because he was not an ATF person. He was one of the ICE people, Border Patrol. And he was capturing illegals that came over, especially drug smugglers, to the place where they targeted and shot his house up. So when the president comes and starts to say we're going to secure our borders and that a lot of people that come over across the border illegally are not good people, that resonated with them, right? So this whole thing of it's just racism. You know, people in Florida, there's people in Florida. I went to Florida a couple years ago in a place in Miami and nobody spoke English. They all looked at me like I was did something wrong because I walked into a store and I couldn't speak Spanish fluently. That shouldn't be the case in America. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to speak Spanish if you're Spanish, but we should have a singular language in America. That every nation has to have one common language in order to prosper as a country. That's just common sense, right? Again, I don't mind bilingual people or multilingual people, but in America, which we speak American English, we don't speak the real English, we speak American English. We should have everyone should have a somewhat a common understanding of English. You don't have to be extremely fluent in it if you just came over here. But you should, at some point in time, that we should have a common language in order for us to communicate effectively. But you have to recognize that that's part of the New World Order strategy to weaken a nation by not having common languages, right? By flooding the borders with illegal immigrants, by not securing the borders. These are all part of their strategy, and they've outlined that and they've said it. So again, when we have someone who is pushing for strong borders or bringing jobs back in the country, or having a stronger position in regards to how we interact with other people. And let me say this is what really bothers me. And like I said, with black people, we got to wake up. We got to get out of our emotions, and we got to start paying attention to things for what they really are. Now here's to show you, like, Obama was globalist 101. The Clintons are like super globalists, right? I'm not saying that George W. Bush wasn't, but George W. Bush still had a certain air of patriotism to him, right? And I'm not saying the Bush family is complicit to the New World Order agenda as well, so I'm not giving him a pass. But what I'm saying is, it was more he was more of trying to make America have a stronger position in the world than the Clintons or the Bushes, because they are very much globalists. Obama was I would say he took the globalist agenda and put it on steroids and pushed it forward faster than anybody in current times. And I'm going to show you a couple of other things too, how he did that, right? But one of the things that really got me is around the same time that Detroit files for bankruptcy, they were $500 million in debt. The Obama administration lends $2 billion to Egypt to help them out. We gave Iran $2 billion in cash just the last couple of years ago. So think about this, and don't let the mainstream media and everybody lie to you and twist the story and deceive and twist it around. Oh yeah, we owed Iran money. The bottom line is, if our inner cities in America are failing, if you can't come up with money to bail out Detroit and bail out some of these other cities, right, these big cities that are filing bankruptcy, then how did you find money to go help some other country? And some of these countries were our enemies, the Muslim Brotherhood and the Arab Springs. These are sworn enemies of America and the Western culture, but yet you give them billions of dollars, but yet you couldn't even come up with millions of dollars to help us. We got inner city school kids, especially black and Hispanic ones, that don't even have textbooks. That, we don't have. So this is, you got to realize that this is all part of the larger strategy to erode away the inner workings of our country, for us to basically be pushed into the New World Order. And again, this is not something my opinion. This is their strategy. So again, the New World Order, the Luciferian New World Order, they're fighting against sovereign, strong nations. That's part of their strategy, is the fight against sovereign nations. And a sovereign nation America is a sovereign nation, which means we don't have to answer to any other nation. We don't have to answer to the United Nations or a larger group. We only have to answer to ourselves. So we have a representative republic government. So the elected officials have to answer to the rule of law and to the electorate. Those are the two people that they're accountable to. That's what makes us a sovereign nation. So we have a constitution that helps to set or dictate the rule of law. And so our elected officials, like our president, only has to answer to the rule of law and the electorate, which means the American public, because we are the ones who elect them in, per se. That's what they tell us. But anyway, that's the philosophy behind it all, right? So that's what makes us a sovereign nation. They don't want that. They want us to be a part of the United Nations, and the United Nations is a tool, is an arm of the global elites New World Order strategy. And so if America's economy fails, then we have to become a part of the global economy. And not only if America's economy fails, that we fail, but there's a lot of countries that would also fail if our economy failed as well. So a sovereign, strong U.S. economy is one of the major obstacles to a new world order, pushing towards a new world order. The Brexit, which was when they voted, the UK, which of course the banking, the international banking foundation, the foundation for the international banking cartel is the Bank of London. So if they stay strong and the American economy stays strong, then it is very improbable that they'll be able to push a new world order agenda anytime soon. So they have to fight against those things. Now, one of the strategies is that the New World Order creates debt slaves. So even the United States educational system, which is based on the Prussian model, it is based on not creating free-thinking, independent people that want to create businesses, but to create people that are workers and debt slaves. That's what it's set up to do. They don't want free thinkers. And so our educational system is set up to teach kids to conform, not to be independent thinkers. Now, here's another amazing thing when we look at the overall strategy is that because they teach us to be debt slaves, that's why there was a big outcry during the Obama administration and other administrations, but especially then, when they kept trying to raise the debt ceiling. So the Republicans and the fiscal conservatives said, we don't want to keep raising the debt ceiling. And Obama came with something that really didn't make sense. It's just not economics 101, but because he was the darling of the New World Order mainstream media, they gave him a pass. And he said that, you know, if we didn't raise the debt ceiling, then it was, what did he say? He said something about the economy. I'm not going to paraphrase it, but anyway, here's economics 101. In order for you to understand the strength of any organization, individual, etc., you have a debt-to-income ratio. So when you have a debt-to-income ratio, it means that shows how strong you are. Because I could be making $1 million a month, but if my debt is $1.2 million, it means that I'm economically weak or fiscally weak, right? So if you think about it in those terms, I could bring in $1 million a month and everybody say, man, you must be rich. But no, what if my expenses are $2 million or $1.5 million? Then that means economically I'm weak, okay? Now use that example for the United States economy. So if you look at the United States economy and understand that we have a debt, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but the Obama administration kept increasing our debt. And every time they raised the debt ceiling, it meant that we put ourselves in more and more debt. And just in the 8 years of Obama's administration, he increased our debt more than every other president we've ever had in the history of the country, just in those 8 years, right? That's part of the New World Order agenda. Now, why is that important? First of all, it's financially, it weakens us. So if we have more debt, and not only do we have more debt, but now we've outsourced jobs and outsourced manufacturing and stuff like that, those were the things that allowed us to have more income. So if you think about a debt-to-income ratio, if you had the income here and debt should be down here, but not only did we raise the debt, but we lowered our opportunity to make income, which makes us even more unstable financially, right? Now let me take it a step further. Who do we owe debt to? We owe debt to the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank that's part of the international banking cartel, which means now we owe them more money. What does the Bible say about that? In Proverbs 22:7, it says the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is a servant to the lender. So the more in debt we are to the New World Order, Federal Reserve, Rothschild banking cartel, the more we are in debt to them, it means the more they control us, the more we are subservient to them. So anytime you have a president like Obama who really put us in even a greater debt, it meant that we put ourselves in an even weaker position financially. So when you start to put all these pieces of the puzzle together, you should start to believe and understand that they are really pushing towards a New World Order agenda. Now the reason they're in panic mode is because, and they started to really step up their attack and their strategy. They keep telling you the policies of Trump are really dangerous and they're going to put us in a bad position. It's dangerous to the New World Order agenda. It's not dangerous to us. It's not dangerous to the average person. getting in a huge amounts of debt, $22 trillion or however much debt we're in. That's dangerous, right? Making us all debt slaves, that's dangerous, right? Having weak borders, that's dangerous. Outsourcing our ability to create jobs and wealth, that's dangerous. And so, and even think about this, the Trump tax cut. Mainstream media has us, not you maybe, but has us brainwashed and convinced to think, yeah, well, he made those tax cuts, but the wealthy and the corporations benefited more than we did. That's because they have more income. If it's based on percentages. But think about this. The reason that's ridiculous is, first of all, if outsourcing jobs doesn't make my income go up, reducing my taxes helps me to keep more liquid income, which allows me to spend more and put more money into the economy. So it's a positive cycle. So if I get more money, I shouldn't be mad at the millionaire who still gets more money. He had more money in the first place. And if he's a multimillionaire, then his liquid wealth is going to be even creating jobs or putting them into investments or something, and all these things help the economy. The average middle class or lower middle class person, their extra income, they don't really have as much liquid income as the wealthy do, for the most part. So theirs is more into being able to afford a mortgage or to feed your family or whatever the case may be. So if we get more money, and that's what this socialist mindset is, and I'm going to touch on that real briefly, but that's socialism, because if I get more money if I go work and I get more money, then that's good for me, right? I shouldn't try to take someone else's money because they're wealthy, especially if it's multi-generational. So some of these wealthy families, that these people get a whole lot of money because their grandparents and great-grandparents, they accumulated wealth over time. And just like any of you out there, if you go out and work hard and accumulate wealth, the government shouldn't take that from you. You should be able to pass it on to your kids. That's what the Bible says. A wise man leaves an inheritance for his children, right? So, but again, they're going against all the different principles, because even when we talk about debt, they're making us debt slaves. The Bible, it kind of dissuades us from getting credit. We should only get credit when we really need it, right? But in order for them to oppress people and put them in bondage, they encourage you to go into more debt and get more credit. So that's part of their strategy, because now you're more subservient to the person who lended you the money. So anyway, the debt that we have as a nation, we owe to the Federal Reserve. So some of you have been following the 2019 movement, and I put a thing up there. Your dollars, these are called Federal Reserve notes. So what happens is, when we go in debt and we raise our debt ceiling, it was the amount of money that we have borrowed from the Federal Reserve. So the U.S. Treasury Department actually borrows money from the Federal Reserve, and the U.S. Treasury puts those dollars into circulation. And the IRS, a lot of your taxes, your federal taxes, actually go to pay back the debt that we owe the Federal Reserve, which is a private organization. It's run by the international banking cartel, and the Rothschild family is one of the head families of the international banking cartel, right? So when you understand, like I said, the things that are going on, and research it for yourself. Look at your dollar, your $5 bill. It's not actually money. It's called the fiat money system, but it's actually a Federal Reserve note. And so they are putting us into debt, right? More and more debt as a nation, which means that we have less and less control over what we're doing. So they create this debt system and put everything in play. When we look at borders, see, and I heard a couple of pastors and leaders, and I was really kind of hurt by it. You know, we have to have compassion and love for everybody. But this whole notion of not having secure borders and somehow or another that's wrong, that's the New World Order pushing that agenda. They're trying to convince you of something that is not true. It's not even common sense, but the old strategy that they have is if you repeat a lie long enough, then people believe that it's true. So when they say it's not, if you don't allow just anybody to come into your country, I saw these liberal young people, these what they call snowflakes, they call them, these liberal young people, millennials, and they're like, there should be no borders. Human beings shouldn't have borders. And that doesn't make sense, first of all. It's not common sense. It's just something that they've been told, that they repeat and most of them haven't even thought it all the way through. But then on the other hand, when something bad happens, they'll say the government should protect us, right? Okay, so, but anyway, the whole idea of borders is ordained by God. It's in the Bible, Acts chapter 17, verse 24. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worship with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath in all things, and hath made of one blood all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the borders or the boundaries of their habitation. So God is the one who came up with sovereign nations and borders. And the reason he did that is to keep this New World Order system from coming in, because it's a system of oppression. It's a demonic and satanic system. And so you have to recognize that the powers that be that's pushing towards a New World Order system are the ones that are trying to victimize you. And so that's why they want you to really fight against any of the anything that opposes them, right? They want weak borders. They want more debt. They don't want us to make our nation stronger, because if the stronger that we are, the more difficult it is for them to push their Mystery Babylon New World Order system. So, and anyway, this has been Pastor Joe Green, and I'm just here trying to decode Mystery Babylon for you. And again, everything that I share with you is documented. I hope you'll do the research for yourself. Don't just take my word for it, but understand that what I'm sharing with you is not just my opinion, but these are things that are very well documented and has been put in place for a long, long time. I love you. Until next time, don't forget the 2019 movement. Please hit subscribe and also hit the notification button so that every time we come up with new videos, you'll be made aware of it. Until next time, I love you. Be blessed of the Lord. Shalom, shalom.
We tax and regulate and restrict our companies to death, and then we allow foreign countries that cheat to export their goods to us tax-free. How stupid is this? Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to declare our economic independence once again. Here are 7 steps I would pursue right away to bring back our jobs. Number 1, I am going to withdraw the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm going to appoint the toughest and smartest, and I know them all, trade negotiators to fight on behalf of American workers. I'm going to direct the Secretary of Commerce to identify every violation of trade agreements a foreign country is currently using to harm you, the American worker. I will then direct all appropriate agencies to use every tool under American and international law to end these abuses. And abuse is the right word. I'm going to tell our NAFTA partners that I intend to immediately renegotiate the terms of that agreement to get a better deal by a lot, not just a little, by a lot for our workers. If I'm going to instruct my Treasury Secretary to label China a currency manipulator, any country that devalues their currency in order to take unfair advantage of the United States, which is many countries, will be met with sharply. And that includes tariffs and taxes. I'm going to instruct the U.S. Trade Representative to bring trade cases against China, both in this country and at the WTO. 7, if China does not stop its illegal activities, including its theft of American trade secrets, I will use every lawful president. Hey, look, this is very easy. This is so easy. I love saying this. I will use every lawful presidential power to remedy trade disputes, including the application of tariffs consistent with Section 201 and 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 and Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. And when they say trade expansion, they're talking about other countries. They're not talking about us, because there is no expansion. They get the expansion, we get the joblessness. That's the way it works. We're going to make America great again for everyone, greater than ever before. And I promise you, if I become president, we are going to be working again. We are going to have great jobs again. You're going to be so happy. You're going to be proud of your president. You're going to be proud, proud, proud of our country once again.